Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm going to put a link on Twitter. Liveread a Rose for Emily with me, your pal, online here. It is too late at night for Bro Beowulf. But I think it's an okay time for something just sort of quiet. Now that I've seen that picture of Mac and the Nightman Cometh, I can't unsee it, and I can't get this stuff off. I can't make it stay on, and I can't make it come off either. So it's pretty good. I'm not going to start yet. Not even sure I want to do a rose for Emily, but it was the first thing that I thought of. Who knows? I'm just going to wait until, until people show up. So book's full of dust. Oh well, still good. How was your day? My day was... How was my day? Can't remember. I had a really... I hung out with Fitz and he chatted to me a lot. I've been playing Medieval Dynasty, which is incredible for me. I'm sure no one else would actually enjoy it, but I love it. It's like 7 Days to Die, but with no zombies and more taxes. It makes it sound really terrible, but it's very, very good. A rose for Emily. Or guess I could read an M.R. James one I haven't read yet, but I can't remember which ones I've read and which ones I haven't. And this is right in front of me, albeit full of dust. Flora wants to come in. Hey, sweetie. I called for you before and you didn't say anything. Hi. Hello. It looks really bad in real life. And I can't get it off because I don't have any makeup wipes that are safe for eyes. So I'm just going to have to wait for it to wear off. Or get some makeup wipes tomorrow like a normal person. 3 people, nearly 5 minutes in. I think that's pretty much us. How was your day, Mary? Mary, am I saying it right? Yes, I've been obsessed with Medieval Dynasty. I've been playing it hours and hours on end. It is mostly chopping down logs and paying taxes. For some reason, I can't get enough of it. Nice. It is 10 p.m. here. Well, past that would be. 10 past, 12 past. That's going to distract me. I found this, I think it's a paperweight. I found it in the $2 shop and I bought it. And that week when we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, I asked my DM if I could have a diamond suitable for Revivify because I found one in real life. And they asked me if it cost me 350 gold pieces, and I said yes, which was a lie. They let me have it because I committed. Committed to the bit. Always. Okay, William Faulkner. A Rose for Emily. It's a Chaos Diamond. Also, hey, what's up? Nice to see you. Nice to be aware of you. These are Chaos Emeralds. Oh, look at that. Must have paid the dwarves far more than $30 for these. And not slightly less. And by dwarves, I mean the ones like who live underground and craft gems and stuff. I'm still in a Beowulf frame of mind. I'm not thinking about little persons. Come here. Come on, say hello. Say hello. We're about to start. We're about to start the story. Do you want to be here for the story? No. Alright, you'll have to tell me if my sound goes out. I'm sure there are some who are jewelers, and I'm sure they're conflicted about it. But before I get cancelled, let's just... A Rose for Emily. When Miss Emily Grierson died, our whole town went to her funeral. The men threw a sort of respectful affection for a fallen monument. The women, mostly out of curiosity to see the inside of her house, which no one save an old manservant, a combined gardener and cook, had seen in at least 10 years. Oh, we're off to a good start. I don't sound sleepy at all. Or sniffly. It was a big, squarish frame house that had once been white, decorated with cupolas and spires and scrolled balconies in the heavily lightsome style of the 70s, the 1870s, set on what had once been our most select street. But garages and cotton gins had encroached and obliterated even the august names of that neighbourhood. Only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and the gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores. And now Miss Emily had gone to join the representatives of those august names, where they lay in the cedar bemused cemetery, among the ranked and anonymous graves of Union and Confederate soldiers who fell at the Battle of Jefferson. Oh, she loves the Civil War. You're a problematic little beast, ain't you? Yes. Come here. Sit down. I can't see the book. Yeah, you have to sit down. You're a good girl. There we go. Just like that. Alive, Miss Emily had been a tradition, a duty, and a care. A sort of hereditary obligation upon the town. Oh, cats love war, don't you? Love war. Dating from that day in 1894, when Colonel Sartoris, the mayor, he who fathered the edict that no African American woman should appear on the streets without an apron, remitted her taxes. the dispensation dating from the death of her father on into perpetuity. Not that Miss Emily would have accepted charity. Colonel Sartoris invented an involved tale to the effect that Miss Emily's father had loaned money to the town, which the town, as a matter of business, preferred this way of repaying. Only a man of Colonel Sartoris's generation and thought could have invented it, and only a woman could have believed it. Fuck you, Faulkner. I don't know much about William Faulkner, but they blend so seamlessly. When the next generation, with its more modern ideas, became mayors and aldermen, this arrangement created some little dissatisfaction. On the first of the year, they mailed her a tax notice. February came, and there was no reply. They wrote her a formal letter asking her to call at the sheriff's office at her convenience. A week later, the mayor wrote her himself, offering to call or to send his car for her, and received in reply a note on paper of an archaic shape, in a thin, flowing calligraphy in faded ink, to the effect that she no longer went out at all. The tax notice was also enclosed, without comment. Kind of standing Emily. They called a special meeting of the Board of Aldermen. A deputation waited upon her, knocked at the door through which no visitor had passed since she ceased giving china painting lessons 8 or 10 years earlier. They were admitted by the... I'm going to say the old servant, because it's just a word we don't use anymore. Not a slur, I don't think, but one we don't use anymore. They were admitted by the old servant into a dim hall from which a stairway mounted into still more shadow. Maybe I should say butler. He's the gardener and the cook. I'll say butler. It smelled of dust and disuse, a close, dank smell. The butler led them into the parlour. It was furnished in heavy, leather-covered furniture. When the butler opened the blinds of one window, they could see that the leather was cracked, and when they sat down, a faint dust rose sluggishly about their thighs, spinning with slow motes in the single sun ray. On a tarnished gilt easel before the fireplace stood a crayon portrait of Miss Emily's father. I know they mean like a painting done in, crayon and that, but I'm just picturing a stick figure with a top hat. They rose when she entered, a small, fat woman in black, with a thin gold chain descending to her waist and vanishing into her belt, leaning on an ebony cane with a tarnished gold head. Her skeleton was small and spare. Perhaps that was why what would have been merely plumpness in another was obesity in her. She looked bloated, like a body long submerged in motionless water, and of that pallid hue. Her eyes, lost in the fatty ridges of her face, looked like two small pieces of coal pressed into a lump of dough as they moved from one face to another while the visitors stated their errand. She did not ask them to sit. She just stood in the door and listened quietly until the spokesman came to a stumbling halt. Then they could hear the invisible watch ticking at the end of the gold chain. Her voice was dry and cold. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Colonel Sartoris explained it to me. Perhaps one of you can gain access to the city records and satisfy yourselves. But we have. We are the city authorities, Miss Emily. Didn't you get a notice from the sheriff, signed by him? I received a paper, yes, Miss Emily said. Perhaps he considers himself the sheriff. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Okay, I'm standing Miss Emily quite hard now. But there is nothing in the books to show that, you see. We must go by the... See Colonel Sartoris. I have no taxes in Jefferson. But Miss Emily, See Colonel Sartoris. Colonel Sartoris had been dead almost 10 years. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Toby, the butler appeared. Show these gentlemen out. So she vanquished them, horse and foot, just as she had vanquished their fathers 30 years before, about the smell. That was about 2 years after her father's death, and a short time after her sweetheart, the one we believed would marry her, had deserted her. After her father's death, she went out very little. Hi, Josh. How's it going? Basically, Miss Emily, she's an old woman. It's a mystery. She just died, and everyone went to the funeral, and now they want to go in and see the house. And now we're getting to the problem of the smell, which was about 30 years before she was old. And right after her father passed away, and then her sweetheart abandoned her. And now you're caught up. After her father's death, she went out very little. After her sweetheart went away, people hardly saw her at all. A few of the ladies had the temerity to call, but were not received. And the only sign of life about the place was the butler, a young man then, going in and out with a market basket. Just as if a man, any man, could keep a kitchen properly, the ladies said. I'm not going to do an American Southern accent in the style of Foghorn Leghorn, but I do want to. So they were not surprised when the smell developed. It was another link between the gross, teeming world and the high and mighty Griersons. A neighbour, a woman, complained to the mayor, Judge Stevens, 80 years old. "What would you have me do about it, madam?" he said. "Why, send her word to stop it," the woman said. "Isn't there a law?" "I'm sure that won't be necessary," Judge Stevens said. "It's probably just a snake or a rat that butler of hers killed in the yard. I'll speak to him about it." They're not using the word butler, but I am. The next day, he received 2 more complaints, one from a man who came in diffident deprecation. "We really must do something about it, Judge. I'd be the last one in the world to bother Miss Emily, but we've got to do something." That night, the board of aldermen met, 3 greybeards and 1 younger man, a member of the rising generation. "It's simple enough," he said. "Send her word to have the place cleaned up. Give her a certain time to do it in, and if she don't—" "Damn it, sir," Judge Stevens said. "Will you accuse a lady to her face of smelling bad?" Nowadays, people don't have that problem. I have heard. So the next night, after midnight, 4 men crossed Miss Emily's lawn and slunk about the house like burglars, sniffing along the base of the brickwork and at the cellar openings, while one of them performed a regular sewing motion with his hand out of a sack slung from his shoulder. Me too. I agree. Hi, Danny. I should have waited 20 minutes. I couldn't have waited 20 minutes. I'll read another story after this one to make it up to you. Basically, Miss Emily's an old woman. No one's alerted them. Josh just arrived. They start off, Miss Emily died. Then they go back to when she was an old woman and refused to pay her taxes. Then they go back to when she was a younger woman and her father had just passed away and her sweetheart had abandoned her and there was a bad smell around her house. And the city authorities are getting into this. And this is around the 1890s, where we are now in the story in this second flashback. Kind of makes sense. So the alderman, she's a poor wee lass. The alderman, instead of confronting her about it, because they were gentlemen in those days, this is in America, um, they're just going around her house sprinkling quicklime everywhere. They broke open the cellar door and sprinkled lime there and in all the outbuildings. As they recrossed the lawn, a window that had been dark was lighted, and Miss Emily sat in it, the light behind her, and her upright torso motionless as that of an idol. They crept quietly across the lawn and into the shadow of the locust that lined the street. After a week or two, the smell went away. That was when people had begun to feel really sorry for her. People in our town, remembering how old Lady Wyatt, her great aunt, had gone completely crazy at last, believed that the Griersons held themselves a little too high for what they really were. None of the young men were quite good enough for Miss Emily and such. God, now we're going to a further flashback. This is great. This is the first backward story in the world. Mwah. We had long thought of them as a tableau. Miss Emily, a slender figure in white in the background. Her father, a spraddled silhouette in the foreground, his back to her and clutching a horsewhip, the two of them framed by the back-flung front door. So when she got to be 30 and was still single, we were not pleased exactly, but vindicated. Even with insanity in the family, she wouldn't have turned down all of her chances if they had really materialized. Emily was unstuck in time. Maybe I am too, and that's why I do the peculiar things I do. No, that's not it. When her father passed, it got about that the house was all that was left to her, and in a way people were glad. At last they could pity Miss Emily. Being left alone, and a pauper, she had become humanized. Now she, too, would know the old thrill and the old despair of a penny more or less. The day after his death, all the ladies prepared to call at the house and offer condolence and aid, as is our custom. Miss Emily met them at the door, dressed as usual, and with no trace of grief on her face. She told them that her father was not dead. She did that for 3 days, with the ministers calling on her and the doctors, trying to persuade her to let them dispose of the body. Just as they were about to resort to law and force, she broke down, and they buried her father quickly. We did not say she was crazy then. We believed she had to do that. We remembered all the young men her father had driven away, and we knew that with nothing left, she would have to cling to that which had robbed her, as people will. She was sick for a long time. When we saw her again, her hair was cut short, making her look like a girl, with a vague resemblance to those angels in coloured church windows, sort of tragic and serene. The town had just let the contracts for paving the sidewalks, and in the summer after her father's death, they began the work. The construction company came with African American people and mules and machinery, and a foreman named Homer Barron, a Yankee. A big, dark, ready man with a big voice and eyes lighter than his face. The little boys would follow in groups to hear him cuss the African American people, and the African American people singing in time to the rise and fall of picks. This is a tricky story. Pretty soon he knew everybody in town. That's definitely it. It's not because I can't be normal. It's because I'm just too cool. Now watch me do karate across the stage. Whenever you heard a lot of laughing anywhere about the square, Homer Barron would be in the center of the group. Presently, we began to see him and Miss Emily on Sunday afternoons, driving in the yellow-wheeled buggy in the matched team of bays from the livery stable. Oh, being normal's incredibly boring. Well, it looks it. At first, we were glad that Miss Emily would have an interest, because the ladies all said, of course, a Grierson would not think seriously of a northerner, a day labourer. But there were still others, older people, who said that even grief could not cause a real lady to forget noblesse oblige, without calling it noblesse oblige. Which is not what that means, but that's fine. They just said, poor Emily, her kinsfolk should come to her. She had some kin in Alabama, but years ago her father had fallen out with them over the estate of old Lady Wyatt, the crazy woman, and there was no communication between the two families. They had not even been represented at the funeral. Yeah, it's Homer Simpson. I'm going to start calling him a Homer Simpson. And as soon as the old people said, poor Emily, the whispering began. Do you suppose it's really so? They said to one another. Of course it is. What else could? This behind their hands, rustling of craned silk and satin behind jalousies closed upon the sun of Sunday afternoon, as the thin, swift clop, clop, clop of the match team passed. Poor Emily. Now, it took me ages to figure this out as a child, but the people are assuming that Emily is having sex with this man before marriage, a northerner and a day labourer, even though she's from a fancy southern family, because, she's left with nothing but the house and no money and everything. That is what they're, not sad about, gloating about, I guess. She carried her head high enough, even when we believed she was fallen. It was as if she demanded more than ever the recognition of her dignity as the last Grierson, as if it had wanted that touch of earthiness to reaffirm her imperviousness. Like when she bought the rat poison, the arsenic. That was over a year after they had begun to say, poor Emily, and while the two female cousins were visiting her. We've got to stand Emily, hell yes. I want some poison, she said to the druggist. She was over 30 then. Over 30. Still a slight woman, though thinner than usual, with cold, haughty black eyes, and a face, the flesh of which was strained across the temples and about the eye sockets, as you imagine a lighthouse keeper's face ought to look. Interesting. I want some poison, she said. Yes, Miss Emily. What kind? For rats and such? I'd recommend... I want the best you have. I don't care what kind. The druggist named several. They'll kill anything up to an elephant. But what you want is arsenic, Miss Emily said. Is that a good one? Arsenic? Yes, ma'am. But what you want? I want arsenic. The druggist looked down at her. She looked back at him, erect, her face like a strained flag. Why, of course, the druggist said, if that's what you want. But the law requires you to tell what you're going to use it for. Miss Emily just stared at him, her head tilted back in order to look him eye for eye, until he looked away and went and got the arsenic and wrapped it up. The delivery boy brought her the package. The druggist didn't come back. When she opened the package at home, there was written on the box, under the skull and bones, 4 rats. The lighthouse keeper's face is probably stern and staring into the distance. But, yeah, Miss Emily. Fuck you. I want the arsenic. I'm not telling you what it's for. It's none of your business. So, the next day we all said she will kill herself. And we said it would be the best thing because we are assholes and so is our culture. When she had first begun to be seen with Homer Barron, we had said she will marry him. Then we said she will persuade him yet, because Homer himself had remarked he liked men, and it was well known that he drank with the younger men in the Elks Club, that he was not a marrying man. Later, we said, poor Emily, behind the jalousies as they passed on Sunday afternoon in the glittering buggy, Miss Emily with her head high, and Homer Barron with his hat cocked and a cigar in his teeth, reins and whip in a yellow glove. She did deal with the tax people like a boss. Then some of the ladies began to say it was a disgrace to the town and a bad example to the young people. The men did not want to interfere, but at last the ladies forced the Baptist minister, Miss Emily's people were Episcopal, to call upon her. He would never divulge what happened during that interview, but he refused to go back again. The next Sunday they again drove about the streets, and the following day the minister's wife wrote to Miss Emily's relations in Alabama. God forbid someone be fucking. So she had Bloodkin under her roof again, and we sat back to watch developments. At first nothing happened. Then we were sure that they were to be married. We learned that Miss Emily had been to the jeweller's and ordered a man's toilet set in silver, with the letters HB on each piece. 2 days later, we learned that she had bought a complete outfit of men's clothing, including a nightshirt, and we said, they are married. We were really glad. We were glad because the 2 female cousins were even more Grierson than Miss Emily had ever been. His hat cocked and his cock hatted. Absolutely. So, we were not surprised when Homer Barron, the streets had been finished some time since, was gone. We were a little disappointed that there was not a public blowing off, but we believed that he had gone on to prepare for Miss Emily's coming, or to give her a chance to get rid of all the cousins. By that time it was a cabal, and we were all Miss Emily's allies to help circumvent the cousins. Sure enough, after another week they departed. And as we expected all along, within 3 days Homer Barron was back in town. A neighbour saw the butler admit him at the kitchen door at dusk one evening. And that was the last we saw of Homer Barron. And of Miss Emily for some time. The butler went in and out with the market basket, but the front door remained closed. Now and then we would see her at the window for a moment, as the men did that night when they sprinkled the lime, but for almost 6 months she did not appear on the streets. Then we knew that this was to be expected too, as if that quality of her father, which had thwarted her woman's life so many times, had been too virulent and too furious to die. When we next saw Miss Emily, she had grown fat and her hair was turning grey. Are you subtweeting me, William Faulkner? Because F you. During the next few years, it grew greyer and greyer until it attained an even pepper and salt iron grey when it ceased turning. Up to the day of her death at 74, it was still that vigorous iron grey, like the hair of an active man. From that time on, her front door remained closed, save for a period of 6 or 7 years, when she was about 40. She was 40 for 6 or 7 years. Stand Miss Emily. During which she gave lessons in china painting. She fitted up a studio in one of the downstairs rooms, where the daughters and granddaughters of Colonel Sartorius's contemporaries were sent to her with the same regularity and in the same spirit that they were sent to church on Sundays with a 25-cent piece for the collection plate. Meanwhile, her taxes had been remitted. Aren't we all? Alright, fine. You're not going grey, Flora. Sorry. Doctor put me on a new inhaler a while ago, and I didn't notice that it was not good. Now I've gone back to the old one, but it's taking a little bit. I kind of like how they look, but they terrify me as well. Then, the newer generation became the backbone and the spirit of the town, and the painting pupils grew up and fell away and did not send their children to her with boxes of colour and tedious brushes and pictures cut from the ladies' magazines. The front door closed upon the last one and remained closed for good. When the town got free postal delivery, Miss Emily alone refused to let them fasten the metal numbers above her door and attach a mailbox to it. She would not listen to them. It's very, very weird to think that there was a time before you had a number on your door, you know? Daily, monthly, yearly, we watched the butler grow greyer and more stooped, going in and out with the market basket. Each December, we sent her a tax notice, which would be returned by the post office a week later, unclaimed. Now and then we would see her in one of the downstairs windows. She had evidently shut up the top floor of the house, like the carven torso of an idol in a niche, looking or not looking at us. We could never tell which. Thus she passed from generation to generation, dear, inescapable, impervious, tranquil, and perverse. And so she died. Fell ill in the house filled with dust and shadows, with only a doddering old butler to wait on her. We did not even know she was sick. We had long since given up trying to get any information from the butler. He talked to no one, probably not even to her, for his voice had grown harsh and rusty, as if from disuse. She died in one of the downstairs rooms, in a heavy walnut bed with a curtain, her grey head propped on a pillow, yellow and mouldy with age and lack of sunlight. I know, it's so crazy. Yeah, the breathing is very essential. Something I'm still getting back. The butler met the first of the ladies at the front door and let them in, with their hushed, sibilant voices and their quick, curious glances, and then he disappeared. He walked right through the house and out the back, and was not seen again. The two female cousins came at once. They held the funeral on the second day, with the town coming to look at Miss Emily beneath a mass of bought flowers, with the crayon face of her father musing profoundly above the bier, and the ladies sibilant and macabre, and the very old men, some in their brushed Confederate uniforms, on the porch and the lawn, talking of Miss Emily as if she had been a contemporary of theirs, believing that they had danced with her and courted her, perhaps, confusing time with its mathematical progression, as the old do, to whom all the past is not a diminishing road, but instead a huge meadow which no winter ever quite touches, divided from them now by the narrow bottleneck of the most recent decade of years. That's very evocative. That's lovely. I love that. Already we knew that there was one room in that region above stairs which no one had seen in 40 years, and which would have to be forced. They waited until Miss Emily was decently in the ground before they opened it. The violence of breaking down the door seemed to fill this room with pervading dust. A thin, acrid pall, as of the tomb, seemed to lie everywhere upon this room decked and furnished as for a bride. Upon the valance curtains of faded rose colour, upon the rose-shaded lights, upon the dressing table, upon the delicate array of crystal and the man's toilet things backed with tarnished silver, silver so tarnished that the monogram was obscured. Among them lay a collar and tie, as if they had just been removed, which, lifted, left upon the surface a pale crescent in the dust. Upon a chair hung the suit, carefully folded. Beneath it, the two mute shoes and the discarded socks. The man himself lay in the bed. For a long while, we just stood there, looking down at the profound and fleshless grin. The body had apparently once lain in the attitude of an embrace, but now the long sleep that outlasts love, that conquers even the grimace of love, had cuckolded him. What was left of him, rotted beneath what was left of the nightshirt, had become inextricable from the bed in which he lay, and upon him, and upon the pillow beside him, lay that even coating of the patient and biding dust. Then we noticed that in the second pillow was the indentation of a head. One of us lifted something from it, and leaning forward, that faint and invisible dust dry and acrid in the nostrils, we saw a long strand of iron grey hair. The end. Ew. Well, I take it that she was probably dusting him regularly when she was still sleeping in the bed, cuddling the dead body. But after she couldn't manage the stairs anymore, that's when the dust just kind of fell onto that grey hair. And all the other shit. It's a beautifully constructed story. It just takes you... It just takes you from Miss Emily dies. Go back a little. The thing with the taxes. We go back a little further. The thing with the weird smell. A little bit further. The thing with the arsenic. Then the sweetheart. Back to the father. Forward a little to the sweetheart. Forward a little to Miss Emily closing up the house, apart from lessons in painting china, which don't really... Forward a little. Miss Emily's dead. And then we see the room. Beautiful. Beautifully constructed. Beautifully told. And the thing with the father, where she just refused to accept that he was dead and let them take the body away, it's something that just kind of folds in with the rest of the story until the end. Um, so that was a rose for Emily. Thank you very much for being here and hanging out with me for a little while. It was a very strange story to read as a little kid because I didn't I understood basically what had happened. I didn't understand the psychosexual nightmare of it, of the class implications, um, the father forbidding the relationships, the daughter being unable to let that go, or him, or Homer Baron. Um, and I didn't understand all the women, everyone in the town thinking that she was having extramarital sex and that's why she should kill herself. I thought I got the events confused as a little kid, and I thought that they all thought she would kill herself after he had left. Um, which made more sense to me. Yeah, kill the fiance and just snuggle up with that body. He was probably a much better listener afterwards. Boning. Oh my god. Mm. Until he was Bones. The way it's described with the clothes that he's taken off, just as he's taken off, like they're not folded or nothing. His socks are in his shoes, all of that is just very chilling to me for some reason. They were boning down, and that's what gave her the idea. What if it was Bones? The fact no one put it together is pretty interesting. It's pretty good. There's a smell like something dead around her house right after her apparent fiance disappears, and she bought arsenic and wouldn't tell anyone what it was for. It's probably nothing. Nope. He died doing what he loved. Eating arsenic. My great grandmother, I don't know how many greats, but sort of mid-Victorian times. Flora doesn't want me to tell this story. They did, but I think they underestimated her so badly that yeah, but they underestimated how far a woman would go, how far Emily herself would go. It just didn't occur to them, I guess. So before I go, I will tell you that my many times great grandmother, her husband, my many times great grandfather, I guess. I don't think of him that way, but he died tragically after beginning an affair with his much younger secretary. He tragically mistook a bottle of arsenic for alcohol and drank all of it. And there was an inquest. And she was just like, well, he loved drinking arsenic. Couldn't get enough arsenic. Don't know how he got his hands on the bottle, but you need it around the house to kill rats with. So, just one of those really sad things. And the judge was like, yep, checks out. So, just goes to show sometimes these things can happen completely by accident and it's no one's fault. Yep, accidents happen. Guy was always drinking his arsenic. Should have known that would go somewhere. So, yeah. A Rose for Emily out of the greatest book ever written. Ugh. From the sound of it, he was a, yep, they were Kiwis. I think they'd come from somewhere. I do like Shirley Jackson very much. I don't know if her works are in the public domain and if I can read them on here or not. I really want to read Mike Cernovich's Gorilla Mindset on here, but I know that's not public domain. Probably get taken down. But it's very, very stupid. I'd love to read it on here. Yeah, so from the sounds of it, the husband was pretty badly addicted to alcohol, which is sad for him, but wasn't a good husband, wasn't a good citizen. And if an accident had to happen, it probably wasn't too bad that it happened to him. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for standing Emily Grierson, one of the greatest female protagonists. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Everyone get a good sleep, and I will see you tomorrow when I will do something or nothing. And wish me luck getting this shit off my eyes. Bye. Good night. Wash your hands. Be good to each other. Check what you're drinking. Make sure it doesn't have a big skull and crossbones on it. Good night. Thank you, Mary.